There's something no one ever tells you about being a deep thinker. It doesn't feel like a gift. Not at first. It feels like a problem. Like your brain received a software update that nobody else got, and now it can't run the same programs as everyone around you. You overthink conversations that ended 3 days ago. You ask questions that make people visibly uncomfortable. You sit in a crowded room and feel completely alone, not sad, just separate. And the strangest part? You've probably never called yourself a deep thinker, but the signs have always been there. Today, we're going to find them. These aren't the obvious signs you'll find in a basic personality quiz. These are the quiet ones. The ones hiding inside habits you thought were flaws. Inside moments you dismissed as just being weird. 10 signs. Each one backed by psychology. Each one pointing toward the same quiet truth about how your mind actually works. Stay until sign 7, because that one tends to surprise people the most. Let's begin. Most people hear an explanation and move on. You can't. Not because you're stubborn, but because something in your brain immediately flags it. This doesn't add up entirely. Psychologists call this epistemic curiosity, a deep, almost physical need to understand things at their root, not just their surface. Where others see a closed door, you see a hallway with 10 more doors behind it. The problem? Most people around you stopped at the first one, and they genuinely can't understand why you're still standing there, asking questions. But here's the truth. That instinct is rare, and it's valuable. It's the same instinct that drives every major scientific discovery, every breakthrough idea, every question that changed how humans see the world. You're not being difficult. Your brain just refuses to be satisfied with almost understanding something. The event ends. Everyone moves on. You go home and spend the next 2 hours quietly replaying it. Not because you're anxious. Not because something went wrong. But because your mind is still working through what it meant. Neuroscience has a name for this. It's linked to the default mode network, a system in your brain that activates during rest and turns inward, processing memories, emotions, and meaning. In most people, this network hums quietly in the background. In deep thinkers, it runs constantly, like an engine that never fully switches off. That dinner conversation from Tuesday, still being analyzed. That comment your colleague made in passing, filed away, cross-referenced, and quietly examined from 4 different angles. It can feel exhausting. But what's actually happening is that your brain is building something, a deeper, more layered understanding of experience that most people never develop. You don't dislike people. Let's be clear about that. But surface-level conversation, weather, weekend plans, vague updates about nothing. It genuinely doesn't compute for you the way it does for others. Research on the Big 5 personality trait of openness shows that people who score high in this dimension don't just prefer deeper conversations. They actually experience shallow ones as mentally understimulating. The brain essentially checks out. It's like being handed a puzzle with 3 pieces. You solve it in 4 seconds and then just sit there. This is why you've probably been called intense at some point, or too serious, or that slightly backhanded compliment, "You're a lot to handle." Those weren't insults, even when they felt like them. They were people recognizing, without the right language for it, that your mind operates at a frequency they weren't used to. This one is subtle, but it's one of the clearest psychological markers of genuine deep thinking. You don't just have thoughts. You observe your thoughts. Mid-conversation, some quiet part of your brain steps back and notices, why did I just react that way? Where did that assumption come from? Is that belief actually mine, or did I absorb it from somewhere else? Psychologists call this metacognition, and it's a cognitive skill that most people never consciously develop. The fascinating part? Research shows that people with strong metacognitive awareness tend to make better long-term decisions, not because they're smarter, but because they catch their own errors before those errors become consequences. Your brain is essentially its own editor, always watching, always questioning, always revising. And here's something worth pausing on. We're only 4 signs in, and already these patterns probably don't sound like strengths from the inside. They sound like complications, like things that make life harder. That tension between what deep thinking actually is and how it feels to live with it. That's exactly what makes this worth understanding. Keep going. You don't just feel upset. You feel the specific quiet sting of being misunderstood by someone whose opinion you didn't even realize you valued. You feel the strange mixture of pride and sadness that comes when someone you love outgrows a version of you they used to need. Psychologist Lisa Feldman Barrett's research on emotional granularity found that people who can identify and name their emotions with precision don't just experience feelings more deeply. They actually regulate them more effectively. Because you can name it, you can work with it. And deep thinkers, almost universally, have a high level of this. They feel things with unusual specificity, not because they're dramatic, but because their minds won't let experience stay blurry. Ask most people what they did this weekend, and they'll give you a timeline. Ask a deep thinker, and they'll probably tell you about something they've been thinking about, a concept they came across, a question that opened up unexpectedly. The what happened matters less to you than the what does it mean. Researchers studying need for cognition, a psychological trait measuring intrinsic motivation to engage in deep thinking, found that people high in this trait experience something almost like pleasure in the act of working through complex ideas. Your brain doesn't just tolerate intellectual depth, it rewards it. Dopamine releases not just from achievements or social connection, but from that specific moment when scattered pieces of an idea suddenly click into a coherent shape. That feeling is your brain's native reward system, and most people never access it quite the way you do. Here's the one that surprises people. Because in a world that constantly praises being social, being energized by other people, the deep thinker's need for silence can feel like a deficiency. It isn't. Studies on sensory processing sensitivity show that people who think deeply also tend to process environmental stimuli more thoroughly than average. Sounds, social dynamics, emotional undercurrents, all of it gets processed at a higher resolution, which means that noise, literal or social, costs more. Silence isn't isolation for you. It's maintenance. It's a condition your mind needs to do what it actually does best. Without it, everything gets louder. The thinking gets muddier. The version of you that shows up starts feeling like a slightly less accurate copy of yourself. People around you decide quickly. You frustrate them sometimes. Not because you're indecisive, but because you're running through implications they haven't considered yet. You're not asking what should I do? You're asking what does doing this mean? What does it set in motion? Who does it affect 3 steps from now? Psychologists studying integrative complexity, the ability to hold multiple competing perspectives simultaneously, found that people high in this trait don't just make more nuanced decisions. They often anticipate outcomes that simpler thinkers miss entirely. Your slower decision isn't a weakness in the process. It's the process working properly, not smarter. Don't misread this. But further along, while people are still reacting to what just happened, you've already moved to asking what it means and what comes next. This is sometimes described in psychology as cognitive temporal extension, the mind's ability to project meaning across time rather than staying anchored to the immediate present. It can make you seem distant, quiet in moments when others are loud, already at the conclusion while the conversation is still building. And it can be lonely, because you're often waiting, patiently, sometimes impatiently, for everyone else to arrive at the place you've already been sitting for several minutes. This one is the hardest to explain, but you know exactly what it means. It's noticing the tension in a room that everyone else finds perfectly comfortable. It's sensing that a relationship has quietly shifted before a single word has been said about it. It's feeling the full consequence of a decision in the moment it's being made, while others won't feel it until weeks later. Psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor Viktor Frankl wrote that the search for meaning is one of the most fundamental drives in human psychology. Deep thinkers don't search for it occasionally. They carry it constantly. That weight isn't a burden you chose. It's simply what happens when a mind processes the world at the depth yours does. Everything carries more signal. Everything arrives with more weight attached. And most people around you, they're not ignoring it. They genuinely don't see it. You do. Here's what 10 signs actually add up to. not a personality type, not a label, not something to put in a bio. A way of moving through the world, one that comes with its own kind of exhaustion, its own friction, its own particular loneliness, but also its own depth of experience that most people never access. The things that felt like complications, the overthinking, the need for silence, the emotional weight, the questions that never fully close, they were never flaws. They were always just the shape of a mind that refuses to stay on the surface. And if this video found you today, that's probably not an accident. If these signs resonated with you, share this with one person who you think sees the world the same way. They might need to hear it. Subscribe if you want more psychology content that actually goes somewhere. And the next video, we're looking at why deep thinkers often feel like outsiders, even in rooms full of people who care about them. That one's already waiting for you. See you there.